Welcome. Hi, this is Carol from SkillCheck, and I'm here with Scott Zucker today. I'm so excited to have him with us. And we're going to be talking about virtual storage management and addressing those legal issues within the self-storage industry and how we can, be more virtual and user-friendly at the same time. How you doing, Scott?
Great, Carol. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to join you. This is a fun project.
Yeah, you're welcome. One of the things that I worry about is, since the storage business is evolving, and especially since COVID happened, and we've thought, okay, we've got to figure out how to do this remotely, basically in some ways, and maybe not as much touch with of managers. Though I'm still sort of a manager believer. I like to have managers still. But I know there are a lot of people, really small stores, that want to do something different. And I think that kiosks are a good way to do that. But I do think, what we are working with and have the difficulty is how do we make it easy to do and where they can actually understand the process, and it's not easy. And I know this place has got some decent signage and a phone number to call if you need help, which is awesome. So they really set up the interior really nicely, I think there. But I think one of the things we'll talk about in a minute is just how you prepare in general. And I think that's, for getting ready for that virtual experience and having unmanned properties and that contactless rental. Uh, I think all of those open us up for some challenges, don't you?
Oh, they do, but our industry is remarkable about how well it pivoted during
Mm.
COVID to move to an unmanned facility and still be successful, actually incredibly successful over the last few years, notwithstanding the limitations about having people at facilities. And I think that a lot of that had to do, well, certainly the technology was there being used in certain ways, not as much as it is now, which has
Yeah.
been fun to see. But also I have to admit, there's a legal piece to this that sometimes people forget is that we had these laws in place for electronic execution of documents. The mobile applications were
Yes.
all permitted and allowed. So everything was there, and we just sort of finally used it and used it successfully.
Yeah.
So it's clearly our future, and the law is in place to allow us to do it, and the technology is in place to allow us to do it.
Yeah. And it just still has a lot of challenges, I think, for us. And I kind of put some here that I thought were, we don't always have the same level of customer care and service. And that's one of my worries. And I I think, Scott, one of the things I worry about most is so many people trying to, live in the unit or, do do just weird things. People, it's dangerous sometimes at the property if you don't have someone watching it.
Well, I think that can be solved a little with the technology opportunities with security and cameras and oversight of the properties.
Yeah.
That is sort of, again, new technology and an opportunity with proper disclosures to the tenant to let them know that maybe a manager is not there on duty all the time. And we've
Right.
moved away from, managers living on properties. It's been a while now since we've had that
Yes.
sort of in our industry. But your concerns are justified. Just because a facility converts to an unmanned property doesn't mean that they alleviate their responsibility for security and maintenance and
Yes.
protection of their customers. I mean, from a legal point of view, the customers are considered invitees. So there's a duty of care that the landlords and operators still have for their customers, even if it's a quote unmanned or
Mhm.
contactless relationship.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring that up about just even cleanliness in the mix of what you just said, because Desiree and I listened to a call the other day. It was a shop call, and it was interesting because the manager was answering the phone, and the customer said, "Hey, I'm here at the property, and I opened the space up, and it's filthy dirty." And the guy said, "Well, the broom is up front, and he was telling him, you go get the broom. And he goes, "No, no, this is a lot of dirt. Like you could grow potatoes." That's what he said. "You could grow potatoes in this unit." was like,
Where'd
what?
all the dirt come from?
Just from under the door is my guess. But he
Okay.
said it was like an inch or so thick or more. And I was like, wow. And then the guy said, well, you can just sweep it out. And he goes, it's too. And he said, the thing is, bud, I'm trying to put my goods in here, and I don't want them to come back and have dirt all over it. And he
It
said,
might have
isn't
been
there
from
something
flooding
inside that I
or
could have?
something. Yeah, no, it sounds crazy. But I've heard these stories of like, sometimes there's dirt movement with flooding, unfortunately, and it gets into the unit, and then they
And
open up
that might have been that unit too. I don't
oh
know.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right, and I know this is so important to you and what you do about the relationship with the customer and being available to communicate with the customer. So there's a balance about how to make sure you are available
Yeah.
and assisting the customer in their case of need. I mean, this is we're still a service business in a lot of
Hmm.
ways.
Yeah.
So how do we? Like I see your note here. How do you help them with their lock, their latch, the overlocks, the
Yep.
issues that they have? You got to have some availability, and whether that's a phone number to call or a kiosk, or I've seen some really cool technology now with virtual managers that are you're actually talking to somebody like I'm talking to you, and someone's
Yes.
on call and you can see them, and that's sort of reassuring sometimes to be able to see somebody.
Right. That it's a real person. I think that even a lot of the services are trying to do that. Have a real person answering the phone. It doesn't have to be your manager. You're going to hire it out.
Right. Well, the call center piece is still certainly with an unmanned property. The call center is so important
Yes.
for a customer. Look, again, these people are going to a location. They may be unfamiliar with it. It may be at night. It can be disconcerting where they are. Sometimes they want to talk to the people that operate the business. So you have to make that available. So you're
Yeah.
absolutely right about covering these issues for your customers.
Yeah. You remember when I had all my properties, they were all in the West, but there were some that I could do this with, and there were others I would never. Only because it's just because of the location and the activity and the propensity for people to want to live in the space or work out of the space or problems. Yeah, just more city problems than some of my more remote locations that were in nicer neighborhoods or yeah, that didn't have so many problems.
Well, but all of these properties can be profitable and successful, sort of handled with care. And
Yes.
I think that that's why management's so important, and
Yep.
how you manage the property, and even a passive, what would you call a passive owner, investor, operator needs to be involved with their property. So they have to go there and be sort of present, or they have to have a good third party manager
To
to
do
be
that.
there. Yeah.
One of the things and the reason that I wanted to work with you today is because, these legal issues, you brought up a lot of these that you have in the magazine, and I really, really appreciate all the time. Whatever you put out, I read. And so I
Well, at least
wanted
somebody
to.
does. That's good, Carol. Thanks.
Yes. And I'm still a reader. I don't care if it, I mean, I get the paper thing and I read that, but sometimes I read it digitally also. But the thing is even if you take things like that and you find a few nuggets, but I loved what you said in this because we're so quickly going to remote or, using kiosks and all these things. And I love a lot of the things you were talking about the obligations that we have. Can you share some of those with us?
Well, it's like we've talked about. I mean, I think the technology that allows us to be contactless, touchless with our customer is fine. I think it's the evolution, like you said, of the industry.
Mhm.
But there still are legal obligations because you still are operating as a landlord for real estate. Again, you're inviting people who are actually paying you to come onto the property to use your property. So there's an
Right.
inherent obligation and duty under the law to have a safe and secure property and to not disregard those issues, even though you are remote or virtual. So,
Right.
there is this burden still of making sure that you are maintaining the property, that you are making sure your cameras and lighting is still working, making sure your gates and
Mm.
doors are still operable. There's this massive list of obligations that we still have as landlords. And don't forget, they're paying us to use use the property. So with that payment comes that obligation to be a good landlord. And look, I know things happen at self-storage facilities. I know there's a risk of theft. I know there's a risk of
Mhm.
damage from water or storms. I mean, we can't, as landlords, protect a tenant's property from everything. That's sort of inherent in our lease agreements on understanding that there's a risk of storage. That's why tenants have insurance or protection plans. But at the bottom line, there still is an obligation as a landlord operator to maintain the property and be careful of how you present your property to the public.
Right. Yes. And even whether they want to pay cash or credit card, what kind of I know people worry about that. Like, how are we going to take cash payments? But again, with kiosk, you can still do that, right?
Yeah,
So,
and I know I've talked to folks that do the kiosks that there's still an opportunity to do cash, but I think that the reality is we're moving away from a cash
yes,
transaction
true.
business, that the credit card or debit cards
Mhm.
or Venmo or other payment systems, virtual payment systems are all the rage. The balance of that, and this is an interesting legal issue, is the balance is that not every person can have a checking account, and every person has the credit worthiness to have a credit card. So there is a reality check that not every customer has the ability to pay by credit card. There are laws in certain jurisdictions where they have said that if you are a brick and mortar location, that you need to have a cash option. Now,
Yes.
when I say that, there's lots of questions whether self-storage facilities should be treated the same as a convenience store in terms of a cash option because of the way that, we're a real estate business. And there's certain exceptions that I could argue that I don't want to get any operators in trouble that are completely
Right.
cashless in a cash legislative area, but they need to be cognizant of the options that their customers need to look into to transact with them. So, for example, if you're in an area where the cashless option is not legislatively supported, the operators need to be able to notify their customers through their
Mhm.
contract, need to give them guidance as to going down to the local gas station and turning their cash into a card that can do transactions. So they need to be prepared via the
Yes.
contract, via their website, to make sure the customer understands the restrictions of payment at the facility. And on top of that, and this is important to add, they need to be consistent in their treatment of their customers. So they can't accept cash from one customer and require credit from another. They have to
Mhm.
be consistent
Yes.
in their operations. So a lot of this can be solved ahead of time by the operator understanding the laws in their local jurisdiction and
Mhm.
then notifying their customer via the lease agreement and via their website information or brochures about those restrictions.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, the other thing is just the functionality of the kiosks is really great, but whether it's, as you're talking about, renting the units or processing the payments or, getting those gate codes, but, everything also being able to be done over the internet, which is so important, or their website. That's one of the things that we're still struggling with. We're, trying to, I've got a new store that opened up in Tacoma, and it's difficult sometimes. We want to make it where everyone can do everything online and then just come in, but it still seems like people will come into the office and get more information because they maybe didn't feel comfortable enough with without going into the office, right? So they don't just, I don't know, I'm not
It,
just sure why why they
it's
don't just
still
go to their unit, but we
no,
must not be doing something quite right, right?
right. Well, but it's fair if you think about it. I mean, we're not an Amazon where your transaction can just be accomplished over the internet. You can't sit
Yeah.
at home and rent and use self-storage. You have to physically still go to the property. And as
Right.
long as we're still physically going to the property, there's a physical expectation that if you have a question or if you need assistance, that maybe somebody is there to help you. I mean, it's a natural psychology, I think, when we go to a location to conduct business. I mean, it's
Yeah.
funny these days. I mean, the last time I was at a McDonald's, I mean, this is sort of the bizarre transition
Yes.
of our world. You know, you go in and you order at a kiosk in front of the counter where you pick up the food. So
Right.
now we've moved to it. You don't even necessarily go to the counter and order your food anymore. Now you first have to go to a kiosk before you. So anyway, and that's just also a physical transaction, but now they're transitioning even fast food. So you know
Yeah.
we'll get there, but in the interim, while customers are trying to figure it out, I think you're absolutely right. There needs to be a middle ground solution. There needs to be kiosk or virtual assistants or good call center information, good posting of phone numbers to call, you know, a way to get somebody if you need somebody.
Yes. I wanted to bring up another point because where are you going to put the kiosk is important because I had a storage property that it was behind a pillar and you just couldn't see it very easily. And so had not one in 3 years, we not had one person use the kiosk. And the owner was mad and he wanted to turn it back turn it back in. I said, after 3 years, you can't. He said, no one has done anything with it. I said, yes, but it's not their fault. And it is kind of behind of a pillar a bit. And I said, and once they see the people, they just go in. I don't know what else to say, but he did. They finally did take it back, which I was surprised about. But I just look at it like, well, sometimes you may not have that, but if there's no one there, then they were certainly going to rent, right? Or going to have to rent from it. I do like some of these. I gave some examples here of, how nice it looks where you even see the office there, but they're rent and pay, so you can do it so easily, right? It looks
Yeah,
pretty
I love
good.
that. I love the signage to the left that we're always open.
Yes.
That's a very friendly approach to this whole
Yeah.
opportunity. But like you said, yeah, I gotta tell you, if I went, maybe I'm old school, if I go into an office and there's a person to talk to or a kiosk to use, unless maybe I'm just making a payment, I probably
Right.
would go to the person. So the kiosks for me is the option that when no one is there
Yes.
at the office, and absolutely it needs to be accessible, and goodness gracious, it needs to be operative.
Yeah.
So you need to maintain your
Exactly.
kiosk. And the worst thing in the world is a tenant trying to pay and the kiosk isn't working. I mean, so you've got to work to make, treat your kiosk like an employee, make sure it's
Right.
working.
Yes, I love that too. But notice something else interesting here in the picture because above the box thing it says courtesy phone. So they must know that, when the managers aren't there, you could pick up the courtesy phone and get someone, right? And so that's awesome too.
Yeah, I think these are essential pieces. The
Yeah.
courtesy would obviously go to a call center. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it'd be very well. Look, you've talked about this for years. I've heard you speak on this for forever about the importance. You don't want it to go to voicemail. You never want a
Right.
call to go to voicemail.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just not the way that we expect service in this industry. Is you expect someone to pick
Yeah.
up the phone or be responsive.
Yeah, and I know that I wanted to show you a couple of, they have some other types of kiosks, like indoor kiosks, in case, you only don't have very many people working there, I guess is the best way to put that. And they're, out of the weather for sure, but they're small and they're kind of mobile too, so you could move them around your property. What do you think of those? You like those?
But as long as they work, that one looks pretty cool. I like the wheels on that thing too.
I
You're
do
right.
too, and you can move it around. So I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. I
Especially,
saw,
I guess, if it's internet based, I guess you can move it around. As long as it doesn't, that one doesn't look like it takes money. So I was going to say, as long as I can't load that up in the back of my truck and steal all your money, then that's
yeah,
probably
I was
important.
assuming you had to put a credit card number in that one, didn't you? That's what I thought too. Is I thought, well, most just take credit cards. This one looks like an older style, doesn't it?
Yeah,
But at least they recessed it, underneath there, and it looks like it's kind of a rural area, but it's
yeah.
24 hours. And
I,
I like this one because it's got the phone there, but it also has a place where you can buy locks. And one thing I liked about this one too is they gave, well, they were selling reasons to rent, access, they kind of give information that, we might find on a rental agreement, right? Uh, so I think it's important, how to lease on in the kiosk, but I think it is important to keep it all organized and really nice looking. And then they put the facility layout so they could help them find the unit, I guess. So easiest way. There's another picture here I wanted to add because they put because it's an interior building, so they had to show it by floors. So that was kind of cool too.
Uh, yeah, I love the technology of our industry. I really applaud the ever evolving user-friendly
Yes.
application for self-storage. I mean, if you think about what we used to be in terms of you know, a drive-up store, with folks that lived on the premises and they're in their camper in the back. I mean, it's amazing to watch this evolution of
Yes.
technology to make it a fourth generation business. It's amazing.
Yeah. And really keeping up with the times of what we're trying to accomplish. I also thought this one, because maybe it looked like it was older property to me, and then they've kind of put the kiosk in there and giving that 24-hour rental option. And again, I think it's you take what you have and you just try to make it work. But I'm guessing it says rent here and move in today, and it gives information. But I think it's also so important, and I'm going to talk about this again in a minute, but having a great rental agreement, I'm sure that's a big thing for you. I wanted to show you this one also because this is storage property my daughter worked at in Marana, Arizona. And they had the ability, you could leave it open, the office open, and you could come in and rent right inside the office. That's kind of cool, right?
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And,
mean,
and
it's not a,
look, I'm sure there's security cameras
yes.
inside, so if people are coming in to do
And it's
that.
a really nice neighborhood. We don't have, I mean, crime in our area is just none, really. We just don't have that many, but it's so convenient, especially when you're busy. And sometimes my daughter would say she would sit there and then they would just do it. And then she would just kind of talk to them while they were there. But she said, if you need help, I can help you, or I can do it totally for you. And then I said, no, I'll do it. And she said a lot of the people didn't, but they also had the Noki doors.
Huh?
And so if the people had the older people around here had a flip phone, they couldn't open the Noki doors, so they had to give them a fob.
Bob's. Yeah, I understand
Yeah.
alternatives for
Yes.
folks that don't have the smartphone capability.
Yeah.
So, which is funny because you think that everybody is there. It's almost
Yeah.
like the credit card option. You
Yeah.
assume everybody's on a smartphone, and that's not necessarily true.
Yeah. It's not really, yeah, that's for sure. I
I will
think,
tell you though, just
go
what you
ahead.
were talking about with the ability to contract, and there's a kiosk in the office. The one thing I like about the the touchless virtual contracting piece is the consistency of every customer getting the same lease, getting the same instructions, getting the same clarifications, and executing the contract. I can't tell you how many times I've had arguments from tenants that said, well, the manager said this and the manager said that.
Yes.
Under the law, it doesn't matter because the
Right.
contract is the contract and the verbal representations, if any, would not apply. But you have to go through that argument process where
Yeah.
the allegation may be the manager said this, the manager said that. When you do these virtual contracts, that takes that issue off the table.
Yes. And I think I will tell you the most I've ever rented in one day is 42.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, there was no talking about the contract.
I hope
There
that
was
wasn't a
none.
dollar move-in special for 42 units.
Yeah, I mean, it was just ridiculous. We did a thing with the University of Arizona, and it was pay for 2 months, get the third month free. And we didn't realize we'd have so many students the same day, right? And it was actually Tom Litton and I. And by the time the end of the day was, I just sat like up against the wall and I slid all the way down. It's like, what just happened? Well, I will never do that again. But then the owner was like, oh my gosh, 40. He was so excited. He just was like, "Oh, this is amazing."
It's a good
But
day.
The other thing I think, especially when we're doing all this remote stuff, we having good direction, good signage, the space, because sometimes when you get into these buildings and it's not clear where your number is. I really like this place because it kind of shows where you're going and which way to go. I thought that was pretty nice. But
Well,
you've got even the exits and the bathrooms where everything is. Because if you don't show them where the bathroom, tell them where the bathroom is, they'll go somewhere else. Well,
well,
unfortunately.
I'll tell you what this reminds me of, though. It's an important reminder for everybody is having every unit secured other than the unit that you are renting, because
Yes.
tenants will get lost at facilities in
Yes.
and will use an available unit rather than going to find the one that they rented. And
Yeah.
a lot of confusion, as you know, would come up from a
Oh my
tenant
gosh.
occupying a space that's not the one that they rented. So the ability to identify and guide them to the correct space is really essential.
Yes.
Yes.
What's so funny about that? Because I opened a store in Northern California and in Fresno, and the owner was like, "I am not going to buy all these locks." I said, "Well, no, these are just the small overlocks because when we have to lock it all up, otherwise customers will get in there." And he said, I'm not spending that kind of money." Okay, this is a beautiful store too. It wasn't like it was going to be that much money, right? And then we had a couple people at very beginning. We were like putting them in like one to one because they kind of all wanted the ones that are close to the front, right? And then the tenant swap, they got in the wrong one. And was that a mess? Oh my gosh. And the customer, I'm just like, wait a minute, they the gate said this, and yet they said this is their unit. I mean, it was hard. It's just a mess. It's hard to fix that when it's already messed up so
It
badly.
is people, I mean, again, physically, they don't want to move out of the unit that they've moved into, even if they've moved
Right.
into the wrong one. So it's really those locks you're talking about. It's just the cost of doing business.
Yes. And I like public storage and a lot of good operators put a little tag also on it. And when they rent it to someone and they, especially like online, and they put their name on it and, like they put customer's last name so they know which one to go to. I kind of like that too. So once they've rented, it's a full experience all the way to where they say, oh, this one's got my name on it. This is it. This is the one I'm going
Yeah,
to.
that's a great idea.
The other the other thing that I think that's so important is having cameras and DVR at the property so we can watch the property. This one store that I did years ago in Seal Beach, California, Bolsa Chica self storage. The guy, I'm not joking with you. He had like 300 cameras. He wanted every single piece of the property to be monitored all the time and recorded. And we had one in where it says moving in boxes back there. We had a server room because there's so many servers in there trying to. And I said, "Sir, we don't need all of this." And he said, "Listen, it's my property. This is what I want to do." And so I let him. I was like, "Okay, it's your call." Okay, but the thing is, he was a movie producer, and for some reason he just thought we need to see everything that's going on. And I thought, okay. And I do see now we have more of a problem, especially when we're trying to go, not have as many people there and be as remote as possible. So now I think that's critical, right?
It is, I think I said this earlier, is the obligation of an operator to create a sense of security and protection on the property when you don't have a manager there is even more
Yes.
important. And I think it's been replaced by the expectation that there be cameras on the property and working
Mm,
cameras. And just like you have here, which I think is really fascinating, is for the customer to see that there's a video system in place and the protection that they're being recorded so that if something
right.
happens, they can go back and look at it and see what's happened. And we found that having these cameras in place, and look, things have gotten less expensive over the years with technology.
Yeah.
So having the opportunity to have more cameras at less cost, especially if you're saving the cost of a full-time manager on duty, all sort
Yes.
of works out. And you're able to sort of offer that sense of comfort to a customer that the property is being watched.
Yeah.
And if something happens, that you've kept a recording within a reasonable time. A lot of these record over after 30 days. Within a reasonable amount of time, if there's something that happens and you report it and the police want the video, you'll be able to provide them some evidence to help
Yeah.
them resolve the dispute. Now, I'll tell you even funnier now, not funnier, but the reality check of a lot of these cameras is those tenants that back into a building or knock into a gate
Yes.
or do something that destroys your property. And you go back to that tenant asking them to pay for the damages, and they go, "Oh, it wasn't me, it wasn't me." And you
Yes.
have that video that shows that it was them. That usually ends the discussion right there.
Yeah. I had a lady in Northern California that was she said that they had this trailer that they had that was really nice. It was a very nice trailer, and it was custom painted. It was beautiful. She said someone stole it, and the manager said, "Hey, I went through everything, and that thing is not coming in and out anytime between when they said." I said, "Well, then make it longer. Call her and see if she's got the dates right." And so anyway, we did all that. And then I said, okay, I'm coming over. I'm going to go through it. So I did. Oh my gosh, it was hours that I was there trying to look for it and couldn't find it anywhere. And I said, something else is going on because we were kind of just, we weren't looking at all of these. We were only like looking at like where her thing was so we could quickly see and when it moved out or whatever. And then what we realized they did is they had someone else rent a unit and then they moved that trailer into that unit and then they act like that we had stolen it or so it was stolen and we were gonna pay for it.
Wow.
Went to small claims court even and the judge threw it out. Thank
Well,
goodness.
after all these years, I don't think there's anything you can sort of imagine that hasn't already happened for you and your properties.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff. Plus,
Yeah.
I think even with you, because you hear so many things, right? That we get ourselves into over the years. But it is strange how those things happen. But again, with good security and with a little bit of research, and sometimes it's odd. The managers sometimes don't even know how to look back on the cameras. And I always tell the people that come and install it, you need to show us how to use this because we
Yeah.
we need to we need to know how to do this because we can't just think it all is up there and we never have to go look at it because you absolutely have to go back and or at least find something that's going to tell you how to do it, which my kids say, mom, just Google it. I think I'm just so stupid sometimes, which is okay too. One of the things you also talk about is just communicating with that potential and that current customer and with virtual facilities. And is there any more onus on our back because we're not there to do have other communication methods, or what do you think?
Well, I think it's the issue of expectation from the customer to understand what they're getting when they're renting from you, and they may not even know that they're renting when they get there. There's no manager on duty, so the advantage of advance notice to the customer, again, as part of the rental agreement, as part of the website or brochure information, so the customer understands how the facility is operating. There's nothing
Yeah.
worse than a sort of a disconnect with customer expectation and reality, because that's where they get sort of upset. I thought I was going to get this. I thought you were going to be there to help me. I thought this, I thought that. So from my point of view, and I guess in a little way, it's sort of in terms of the legal clarification of what those real expectations should be met by
Mhm.
the responsibilities of the operator can be identified in the rental agreement or disclosed by the website. So you avoid any of that sort of miscommunication or disconnect, which creates dispute. And if you have
Yes.
dispute, you have the risk of litigation and costs and court and all that.
Mhm.
So things that you've identified here on this note is provide explanations and instructions on the kiosk or the website or the mobile applications or the call center. All are extremely vital in our world of unmanned facilities. Because where else are they going to get it? I mean, they can't necessarily talk to the manager on duty. They have to get that information. And what I like, again, is this information is being provided in a consistent approach to all customers. And if a customer later on says, "Oh, I didn't know that," and I just get a kick out of
Right.
this because operators that do this are my best friends sort of thing, is when I say to them, "Well, is it in your rental agreement? Is it in your kiosk? Is it in your
Yes.
website?" And they go, "Yes, Scott, here it is." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, problem solved. You've done
Problem.
everything you're
Yes.
supposed to do."
That's excellent. And I think Well, and I've been a proponent of having great rental agreements, and that's why I use you to do that too, because the information is so important, and it's all of what's saves us and protects us from problems. And I love because you always make it palatable and simple, and yet you want to protect people by having good rental agreements. But I do think that now with this different type, there were several things that you think should be in the rental agreement based on knowing that you're going to have people using a kiosk or something else. Any comments on the things that I have here about the rental agreements
Yeah,
executed or
so
whatever?
you're absolutely right. So I'm good. I'm certainly a proponent of a good rental agreement. Again, this is the real estate business. You're a landlord renting space to a tenant. It's all based upon the contractual agreements between the parties. They're essential. I mean, I will, lambast any operators that don't take careful attention to the rental agreement.
Mhm.
Also, careful attention to making sure that their tenants sign the rental agreement before they occupy the space. I mean, that's a gigantic no-no,
Yes.
that they're not like watching the store to make sure that their tenants are signing the leases. But as their facilities modernize to, just like you said here, maybe the no-key lock or another digital system, our standard rental agreements would say, tenant, you're obligated to put your lock on the space.
Yeah, which kind of goes with my next slide too, because I loved what you said about this. Keep going.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no. So that doesn't apply because
Right.
if you have a digital locking system, but your lease agreement references the tenant's going to put their own lock on the unit, you've got to disconnect with the
Yeah.
operational reality of your facility. You haven't taken the time to update your rental agreement to match your operational reality.
Right.
So here's an example, just like you've provided, is if you're doing a digital lock, you've got to update your rental agreement to address digital locks. If you're doing cashless facility, you have to update your rental agreement to take out references to payments by cash.
Right.
If you're doing anything different with the technology that's available to you, you have to take the time to go back and make sure your rental agreement matches your operational reality.
Yes. And I think the locking issue, boy, has it changed over the years now. Now we can even remotely do a lot of this stuff. It's just crazy, isn't it? I think it's wonderful, but it's
Well,
the
it's pretty
technology.
cool. It's certainly made things easier. I mean, I know, Carol, I know you've been there. I mean, to cut a lock
Oh,
result of having to enforce a lien process and to
yeah.
take, bolt cutters and cut the lock, or take a drill set and make sure you don't drill your hand as compared to the
Right.
lock. I mean, now you can press a button and unlock a unit. And
Yeah.
from my point of view, that does not change your legal status at all, that you're able to remove the lock by simply pressing a button,
Button.
as
It's
compared to
amazing, isn't
removing
it?
a lock through cutting or destroying
Yeah.
the lock. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Crazy.
it's crazy. So
Yeah.
it doesn't change the legality, the bailment status based upon the technology. But again, you have to explain the difference to your customer up front in the rental agreement.
Yeah, I had a manager in Stockton, California that was drilling off or no, not drilling. What's the little saw thing that goes, doggone it. uh, it's like a Dremel, but it's bigger. But anyway, he was clearing it off, and all these sparks were going around, and it got inside, and it was the guy that had his unit there was a painter, and so he had rags in the front and some paint and some other chemicals there, and we lost about half of the building
Oh,
because the fire started just from the sparks.
wow. Well, there you go. That's another one of your lessons learned. I mean,
Yeah, and my
save your
manager.
building, use a digital lock.
Yeah, use the digital. Well, we didn't have them then, but we were, he could still have drilled it, and he didn't like to do that, so he was doing his own manly way. The other thing I like about this is, having signage for the overlocks, around the property. I really love this one because the signage was there, on like an aisle, about removing it, how to do it, what to do with it. So that seems like it makes sense too, doesn't it? To, If you're
It
going to
does.
have that lock, show them.
Yeah, no, I think about the frustration of a customer coming to the facility, can't open their unit, or in this case, you've got the red lock on it. They need to understand, and again, you've seen this so many times. A customer says, "Why is my unit locked?" And you have to say, "Well, because you haven't paid the bill."
Yeah.
And sometimes there's just a disconnect there about how the business works.
Yeah. And some customers have enough tools to get it off. I guarantee
Well,
you. Or,
and I hate to
ruin the
say it,
hasp
that's
and
that's even true of the digital lock. I mean, look, there's a reality that tenants will sometimes
yeah.
break into their own units.
Yes, they will. Yeah, just to get that red lock off.
Yeah.
And also the other thing is I like about this is, having a place to return those overlocks and making sure they know where that is. And then I guess the next thing would be just, having someone else to handle those external or those calls that are coming in, but with, people that if you don't have internal people answering the phone, which you can, but maybe it's a call center is another option, but you've got to have several people scheduled. I know we are working with our mystery shopping to handle even calls like that. We do not necessarily, we do sales, but we also evaluate service calls also for several companies, not just the sales aspect, but the service also. And that's whether it's a 1-800 number, whatever. The other thing, I guess the last thing is that that call center option, or having that call center option. And I put a couple of different companies here that are in self-storage and are good at what they do. But I do think, having that call center option will certainly make it easier for customers to be able to get a hold of someone even though that operator probably is not going to know, exactly, or maybe able to help them much. But hopefully it'll at least be able to get to someone, because that's the other hard part. I have had call centers. I'm like, yeah, but you guys didn't call us. You took the information, but you never called us. So that was kind of a little frustrating at times. But we did work it out, and they realized that, okay, well, we'll do this for you too. They're like, okay, well, but if there's a problem at the store, we need to be notified. And if it doesn't mean, if no one's answering at the store, there needs to be a triage of people to answer, right? In case is a problem.
Absolutely. I think, look, as we move towards this unmanned reality, there has to be someone at the other end of that
Yeah.
phone if someone has a question. It may not even be the phone. I mean, look, we have to be honest. There's a reality of the sort of the chat bot
Yes.
evolution that's coming too. If you
What do you
have a
think about that?
question, yeah, well, I mean, if the information that's being provided is accurate and assists the customer to solve the problem,
Yeah.
then it's working. If you have a waiting time for someone live to answer your call, you may choose the sort of the chatbot answer. The most important thing is that the operator recognizes the service component of the business and does something to assist the customer. There'd be nothing
Yes.
worse than a voicemail message that says, on a Friday night at 8 o'clock, someone's having a problem. Says, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're closed for the weekend. Call us back at 8 a.m. Monday morning."
Yeah.
You're going to lose that customer. You're just going to
Yes.
lose that customer.
Yeah, and that's hard. And I do think even with the call center options, I know we as at Skill Check evaluate call centers also, even like for the customer, if it rolls over to a call center, they want us to evaluate them and how they're doing. And I do think that's a good, feeling that at least, we're trying to still assess how the call center is doing, and if they're giving at least as good, if not better service than they would have gotten. And I think that goes a long way to help our industry be better at what we do, for sure.
Absolutely.
Scott, first I want to thank you for years and years of help. You've saved me over and over, and you've always been so good to share information with our industry. You're certainly an icon for me as far as, I read everything that you write and put out, obviously, because I made this webinar just from stuff that I watched or I read that you did, and I thought, oh, that would be such a good webinar. But then I wanted to invite you here because you're so good at what you do, and you know storage so well. And I just had some customer that I did some work for building a new property. And I said, I've got a guy out of Atlanta, and like, oh no, we don't want anybody, out of the state, because they don't understand our lien law. I'm like, no, this person like works in this business, and this is his I don't know if it's your passion, but it certainly seems like it, that you love self-storage and that, you do it in all different states. So I
Yeah,
think it's important
we're all
important
very
to,
lucky. You and I both. We're very lucky that we're in an industry that's a great industry with great
yep,
people that
wonderful. Yep.
and been successful, and we get to share that success with our customers and
Yeah.
clients. So that's a nice thing.
Do you kind of remember in the early years, when did you start in storage?
1989.
Okay. I started in 84, but I used to be on the plane and people go, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm in storage." And then they're like, "Storage? What's storage?" We don't say that anymore. Now I have to like give a dissertation about, how, they want to, buy into it. They want to get into it. I'm like, "Oh, or something they got sold or, some kind of weird, I don't know, conversation about stupid stuff."
It's amazing, in the 30 years or so we've been doing this, is
Yep,
to watch what's happened. It's remarkable.
it is.
Uh, and we've both been at it a while, so we've seen a lot, and I think people appreciate that perspective of experience to help them.
Yeah.
So you and I both provide I think, an important service to those businesses out there, many that are new to the industry that
Yeah.
don't know what's coming. So I think it's great that we're able to
Yes.
do this, and I think it's what you're doing here with these webinars are great, and make them available for people to see. I think it's great. I'm
Thanks.
excited to be part of it. Thanks for including me.
Yeah, I kind of, my son laughs at me because we don't get that many views. He's like, "Oh my gosh, mom, you got to have a K behind it before it's, important." And then even then, he's like, he just laughs at me because I'm like, "We got 1,000 or we got this, but it's the storage industry still, and it may not, I could probably even still do better than that. But I think it's important to put things out, and you have been such an inspiration to me in like, because I love the law now because the things that, when you talk about it, and I've heard you at all kinds of different things, and it makes me want to research and do more and make sure that my employees also know and understand how important the rental agreement starts off everything. If you don't get that right, then we've could mess up in all kinds of other places. So
That's true.
hopefully we,
That's true. Good old
yeah.
rental agreements.
It is true, and it's important that, and I love how so many of your things, are highlighted in the, so people can just, go skip through the stuff that maybe they don't want to read and get to the really important stuff. And I love that because it really sets apart the things you absolutely need them to make sure that they're looking at. I'm better about reading any contract now just because of the rental agreements and storage. Do you know, I'm sure you know this, Scott. Lots of people go to Public Storage and get their rental agreement and then just change a little couple of the information. I'm like, don't do that. Go to a professional, get it done right. And I just refer you to that because,
Well,
people who
I
use,
think everybody should have a rental agreement that matches their facility,
yes.
their operations. We talked about how important it is to connect the document to the realities of their facility. Everyone
Yep.
has their own nuances of their own properties, which are exciting, and how they differentiate themselves from their competitors. So
Yeah.
they should have the rental agreement that matches the uniqueness of their facility.
Yeah. And the state. Sometimes they'll steal
And,
it from another state.
oh
Like, why
gosh,
would you
no,
do that? You
please
should,
don't. Yeah, no, no, no.
yeah, at
That's
least get
one
one
thing I
from
wish
your
I
own
could
state.
change. If there could be a model law for all 50 states that we could all follow,
Oh,
for multi-state operators. But here we are in a world where each state has its own separate self-storage law.
yes.
Yeah, if you're in a different state, you need a different
Yeah.
rental agreement.
Boy, some are much stricter, aren't they,
They
than
are,
others?
yeah, no, they
Yeah.
are. But I'll tell you that the national and state associations have been great in trying to
Yeah.
modernize the laws to assist the operators in their states, and therefore operators need to update their rental agreements to match the changes in the laws too. So, you know,
And
doing
and
things like
how,
watching this and making sure you're up to date
yeah.
and listening to you is really important to make sure they keep up to date with their state laws.
I I I've always tried, if we can do it, if there's something that happens, but how often should someone, I mean, is it yearly or is it when you hear something has changed? What do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of value in just an annual checkup for
Yeah.
life. I mean, we do it for our health. We should do it for our businesses. I
Yep.
think that that operators should take a deep breath and look back at the year of operation, say, well, I wish I had this in my rental agreement, or, because this happened to me, or I wish I wanted to do this. And that's the time to make the changes.
Yeah.
Certainly if the state law changes, you have to update your rental agreement accordingly. But, I'm a big fan of annual checkups.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's, there's something to say that for your business too.
Yeah. And I think, Scott, the other thing is, even though, when you're looking at your rental agreement, you look at a lot of different things that for that state or how they're operating, right? I mean, if they're completely remote, it's going to be maybe a little different than if you got managers on the site. So I think it's important to make sure that, and I've got a new store that's in the North Dakota. And so I told them, they're like, can't we just take one from someone else? I said, no, I've got a guide that you can go to. And once they get it up and running, they're going to come see you, or call you about it. But I just think it's so important to make sure it be around your state's law, not one that you picked up from somebody else and then tried to, mesh it together to
Yeah,
whatever.
no, that's a disaster waiting to happen. I mean, people are
Yes.
spending so much to create beautiful, expensive properties.
Yes.
It's the investment in the legal and regulatory compliance. I can't look at
Huge.
my business, I know, but I also think that it's a worthwhile investment.
Right.
Spend their money on the beautification of their properties. Spend a little bit more to make sure they're operating legally.
Yeah. Well, Scott, thank you so much, not only for the years of friendship, but your time here today. I really appreciate it, and I think you're amazing, obviously. If people want to contact you, is this, you've got your phone number here, and then how to get you by email.
Yeah.
And I hope that if they're listening, that they can give you a call and get some help with their rental agreement.
Well, great. Well, thank
Okay.
you, Carol. It's
All
been an
right. Thank
honor.
you,
Thanks
Scott.
for having me on. I appreciate
Okay.
it.
You bet.